Boom. All right, welcome everybody. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the incredible new world of spleen-based stimulation to reduce the inflammation in the human body. Not just in animal studies anymore. We actually have data that shows that if you stimulate the spleen, and it's called the specific cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway that sits right against the spleen, when that is stimulated specifically, you can get a massive global reduction in blood-borne inflammation. And so a lot of conditions that people do end up coming to our Facebook group with typically tend to have some form of an autoimmune condition. And what an autoimmune condition is basically when your immune system starts to go too crazy, just a little bit extreme in terms of how it responds to specific situations. So we're going to talk about that specific location, where it is. I'm going to show some pictures up here on the screen. And then we're also going to dive into what are some of the techniques and methods that you could potentially use today to start stimulating your splenic anti-inflammatory pathway, which is really a component of the vagus nerve. And you'll start to understand why, if your vagus nerve is injured or pinched at your neck, or if you're malnourished, which are really the three common areas. Lack of stimulation of the vagus nerve entirely, you just don't know how to use your vagus nerve at all. That's very possible. Second one would be pinching at the level of the neck. And then third would be malnourishment. When adults were surveyed in the West, they found that nearly 60 to 70% of adults in the late 80s were deficient in the crucial ingredient for the neurotransmitter that makes this whole system work. So if you're deficient in that specific neurotransmitter, then your cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway cannot even engage at all. So it becomes a very dangerous situation because you're not getting the right type of nutrients. So we're going to cover all of that, but here what I want to do first is just kind of get you familiarized with what the spleen is and what it looks like. And I'm actually going to pull up my handy dandy best bud here, which is going to be my Brave browser. There we go. So we can go and look together at some of these aspects of what the spleen is. So I'm going to just reshrink this so you can all see it. So yeah, Google Images is actually a pretty tremendous resource for kind of having a medical understanding of the body. It's a treasure trove of stuff. So let's click on some of these pictures. So first thing that I think is important to understand is just where is the spleen at all. So if we click on this picture, and we'll zoom in here a little bit on my end. So let me just check, make sure you can see that. Okay, good. So for the location of the spleen, you're typically looking at a rather small organ. It can fit in about the size of the palm of your hand on average. So it's kind of like a 4-ounce piece of steak, if you're thinking about it, or a 4-ounce piece of salmon of some sort. It's got the consistency similar to the kidneys. It's a organ that helps your heart create a reservoir of red blood cells. And so it also helps filter your lymphatic tissue, and the spleen is actually the largest lymphatic organ in your entire body, which is pretty incredible. So it's very important. And so this is the location. So here's a good trick. So I want you all to learn where your spleen is. And what I often find is that when people get on calls with me and we're kind of evaluating them to see if some form of vagus nerve stimulation technology might be a good fit, when I mention the spleen, they say, you know what, Sterling, I actually have pain exactly on that side of my body. I wonder if that's related. And I go, I wonder too. And most often it actually is, because your spleen can enlarge and gorge itself to 2 times the normal size. And that's a really bad situation. So let's go and find out, how can you find where your spleen is located? And there's a really easy kind of a little trick that you can use. So what I want you to do is hold out your left arm, your left elbow. And so what I want you to do is find the bone that's on the inside region of your arm. So there's the very bottom bone of your elbow, but then over here, there's another little bone that's even closer to the side on the inside left of your arm. Now, what I want you to do is take your arm, take both arms, and then push them here. I'm going to go back to normal video so you can see me. So you're going to take this part of your elbow, this little bone here, and you're going to take your arms, and you're going to go boop like that. You're going to push them onto your rib cage on both sides. Then what you're going to do is you're going to find where that location is right here. So generally speaking, where that bone I pointed to is going to be located right on top of your rib cage, and that is essentially a good starting point for you to figure out where your rib cage, where your spleen is located. It's just generally going to be just below that area. So then what you do is you take the palm of your left hand, and you're going to plant it right there, plant it right where there in the center of where that bone touched, and then you have a good estimate location of generally where the spleen is going to be located, okay? And that's really important because if you have any pain or twitching or soreness or anything like that in that area, that's a pretty good indication that your spleen itself may actually be having some issues, some challenges. So it can be extremely helpful for you to know where your spleen is. And given that this is a group on vagus nerve stimulation and really how important that whole world is, knowing where it is located first is a good starter step to you potentially implementing something like there are techniques and things you can do to stimulate that specific area with targeted pulsed sound, actually. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So anyway, I want to go back into the Googles and pull up another picture. Here's another picture just showing splenomegaly from the Cleveland Clinic. And yeah, so this is typically what you'll see if the spleen gets enlarged. Let me pull this over. So this is what happens. Your spleen can get extremely big and very uncomfortable. It wraps around your stomach here on the side, and it pushes right up against your rib cage, and there's not a lot of room for it. And so this will typically happen if you are really ill. So that's an indication of your entire immune system trying to produce inflammatory cytokines in mass. So that's generally speaking what is going to happen. So great. So let's look at another picture. And if you guys have any questions or whatever, I'm just going to kind of check back in on the chat here from time to time as we're looking at the screen. So if you have a question as we're going, feel free to ask, of course. Here's another kind of a good picture, right? So here's another kind of a reference shot. So you can generally see that's a little bit higher, but more or less that is close to where the spleen is located. Each picture is going to give you kind of a different sense of where this thing is. Here's another cool shot. So this is actually a ultrasound scan of the spleen, and so you can specifically see where the spleen can be pictured using an ultrasound imaging device. So you can image the spleen through the rib cage using an ultrasound transducer, and that may give you a little hint as to what are some good ways to actually stimulate the spleen as well. Just a little hint. So let's see, what else? Anything else? Here's another picture. I think this is another helpful picture. So right here you can see this will be the left side. This right here where I'm moving my mouse is where the elbow would be. And if you see it where it hits right there, it's going to be hitting right on top of the spleen on the left side. And so your liver is on the right side, your spleen is on the left side, and it's much smaller, but your spleen can get enlarged and actually dangle down below the rib cage. So these are some pretty important things to know. Now, what I also want to show you is the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway. So let's see here. What's a good primer? Here's an okay one. I'll try to make this fit here in the whole picture. Okay. So I believe you should be able to see this for the most part. My face is kind of in the way. Maybe I need to drag my little camera out. Okay, I'm I'm going to hide down here. Heyo. Okay. So what you're looking at here is kind of a collection of the different pathways that your vagus nerve takes to get to your spleen. So over here, I'll do this. So right over here, you see the pathway of the vagus nerve starting at the brainstem, and then this is actually how the vagus nerve receives information from your spleen. So your vagus nerve keeps track of some of your splenic activity, but mostly what it's doing is here on the other side, which is over on this side right here. And so what you're going to see is that there's dual innervation between the vagus nerve and the spinal cord, and it's called the splenic nerve. And your splenic nerve is when your sympathetic system, when you're stressed, is activating inflammation production in the spleen. But then when you activate your vagus nerve, it reduces inflammation in the spleen. So that's one picture to use as reference here. Now let me get another picture. Here we go. So there's kind of an indication. Vagus nerve goes directly to the spleen. This is a very well-known pathway and is very, very important. Here's a good one. Okay, so this picture talks about the neurostimulator that can be implanted on the vagus nerve. Let me make sure my picture's here. Good. So this over here talks about a little stimulator. I believe it would be right over here. The stimulator will go onto the neck, right here on the neck, on the vagus nerve. It's this kind of like little bus-looking thing. It clamps around the vagus nerve, and then they stimulate, and the target stimulation is the spleen. And so early models of this would stimulate the spleen in the neck, but newer devices, which I'll discuss, actually will stimulate directly right here at the vagus nerve efferents that go into the spleen. So this is getting more and more advanced by the year, and so in the future, you may not ever have to have anything stimulating your neck vagus nerve. You may just be able to stimulate right here at the spleen. And so what this is talking about is the usage of the splenic vagus nerve anti-inflammatory pathway to reduce inflammation in the gut, to increase barrier function of your stomach lining, of your intestinal lining. It reduced abdominal pain. It decreased inflammation in the joints, decreased joint damage, and reduced joint pain just from this one type of stimulator. And it also found to reduce the production of systemic inflammation coming from the spleen, and it reduced the activation of circulating immune cells. This is why this is such an important aspect, which is that if your spleen is not receiving signals from your vagus nerve, then you're going to have a way overactive production of immune cells, which then go up into your brain and activate localized inflammation in your brain. So if you have poor vagus nerve function, you are potentially setting yourself up to have ongoing, persistent, and chronic inflammation, not only in your body, but also in your brain. So the takeaway here is that stimulating your vagus nerve is extremely important if you want to maintain health, and it's also extremely, extremely important if your health has already deteriorated. So it's a dual-purpose treatment. Healthy people, if you're watching this, don't be like, well, I don't have Crohn's disease. I don't have rheumatoid arthritis. I don't have an autoimmune condition, so I don't need to do anything here. This does not apply to me. And that's completely fallacious thinking. Your vagus nerve at any moment in your life could up and fail on you. And if you're in that situation and you don't know what to look for, there are certain markers you can use to physically detect if your vagus nerve is working or not. Typically, like heart rate variability is a really good pre-indicator of the potential development of this exact type of disorder. Measure your HRV. You can use like a optical sensors, wristwatches. Just type heart rate variability into Google, and you'll find all kinds of great tools that can track this vagus nerve network, more or less. So if you're healthy, you should be paying attention too. This is not, you're not immune from falling ill, from falling incredibly ill suddenly. And if you're an unhealthy person, if you have a chronic illness that's inflammatory related, then you should absolutely be rushing to find some kind of a vagus nerve specific stimulation modality. No BS. I mean, I'm absolutely serious. This should become your priority in this, given how effective this tool is across the board, and really how safe it is. It doesn't come with a lot of the side effects of taking drugs or doing a surgery or whatever, right? Some people have their spleens removed, and that's a very subpar treatment for sure when it comes to treating these things, right? So, okay, great. So let's continue. Let's look at some of the potential, let's look at some of the more potential treatments of splenic issues, okay? One that is extremely, extremely promising, that I think is going to totally change the world in a lot of ways, is going to be called ultrasound splenic stimulation. So this is just pulled from a random article here on ResearchGate. This is just the picture. So what you see over here on this side of the screen is where the ultrasound transducer is placed to specifically target the splenic nerve. Splenic is the nerve that goes from the vagus nerve into the spleen. And when that nerve is produced, there's a cascade of anti-inflammatory processes that happen that go all the way to macrophages and literally signal to macrophages, hey, stop the production of these nasty-ass immune upregulatory proteins and stop the production of inflammation throughout the whole body. And it's done literally with a little bit of ultrasound pulsed to the spleen. That means zero implantation of devices, zero surgical procedures, zero delivery of any kind of drug. As soon as you place the ultrasound, it's literally having a bio effect within the first millisecond. You don't have to keep it there for hours. An effective dose would likely look like holding an ultrasound transducer on the splenic nerve for about 5 to 10 minutes per day to have a very highly effective treatment for an overreactive immune system that is actually killing you from the inside out. Not to get too graphic, but if you have an overactive immune system, it's killing you from the inside out. Everybody who deals with that knows what that's like. It's attacking you from the inside out in your brain, and it's attacking you from the inside out from your entire body. So it's very, very important. But you'll also notice here in the very, very middle, maybe I can point to it. I'm going to get good at this. Right here, you see something called ACH, which stands for acetylcholine. So acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter that the vagus nerve needs in high amounts in order to make any of this work. So if you came and you were completely deficient in acetylcholine production in your body, which is very possible, it wouldn't matter how much ultrasound, how much of an implant, how much good work you're doing, no matter how many herbs or acupuncture or energy work you're doing, if you're deficient in acetylcholine, which is more common than you think, then none of this stuff is going to really work that well. And then you'll be scratching your head going, gosh, I'm doing all the right stuff, but I don't know why that isn't happening. And the reason that's not happening is because you're likely deficient in the crucial supplement, or you can get it through natural food, is called choline, CHOLINE. So if you aren't in some way probably taking some kind of a specific choline supplement, I would recommend choline bitartrate to start. It's a really low cost, really affordable. Maybe a bottle costs like $13 for a 60-day supply. It's very well tolerated. You can take about 500 milligrams a day, and very few people, even people who are highly reactive to supplements, typically don't get reaction to choline because it's something your body desperately needs, so it's going to put it to good use. So choline is extremely important here. And that could help because the other component here that we have to look at here is the neck. I want to just briefly show you the atlas bone vagus nerve. So I'll probably see something from Caring Medical. Yep. And then Atlantomed. So which one do we want to look at here? So the nervus vagus. There we go. So I'm going to expand this. So you can kind of see it a little bit here, which is that right here, this is called the nervus vagus. Let me just make sure my picture is good. Okay. So you can see what's called the nervus vagus, which is right there. And let's follow that nerve up, right here, right through the middle. Let me make sure we have the cursor. So you can see that right there. And it's going to travel up into your brain. And this bone that's colored and highlighted in green is your atlas bone. These two items nearly touch in your neck. So if you have neck and cervical instability, you could literally be pinching this nerve. And if the nerve is pinched, then you have no signals going from your brain. So all that meditation, all the DNRS, all the polyvagal theory, all that stuff that you're doing, honey, good on you for taking action there. But if your neck is rotated just slightly and you're pinching the left side of your vagus nerve, you have zero potential communication between your brain and the anti-inflammatory things you're doing to your spleen. And then you get the exact same process, which is massive production of inflammation, massive production of immune cells that trigger inflammation across your entire body. So this is why in our program, we specifically talk about there are really three primary areas you need to look. One is you need to be stimulating your vagus nerve in some way, shape, or form. And how we specifically do that would probably be specifically with a sound-based direct stimulation device going to your vagus nerve, not only in your neck here, but also down at your spleen. We don't do ear stimulation in our program, but for people who are just trying something, who are desperate, who you're just, I just need something I can buy right now today, there's the Vagus Cure website, which can have some potential anti-inflammatory effects, but ear clip stimulation will not reach the spleen if you have a bad neck. So that's why we also talk about the red ball process, which the red ball is a fantastic resource that can get you strengthening your neck and rebalancing this neck bone to no longer compress your vagus nerve. So you see how all these things kind of work together. There's really three key aspects. Is also you need choline in your body. You need good digestion to be able to get the acetylcholine in your spleen. You need a healthy neck, and you need to be stimulating your vagus nerve in some way, and you need to be doing it in the right location. So that's that. Now I want to look at some other thing real quick. And we're just going to go briefly to our website. So little self-promotion here. This is going to be, the URL is vegushub.com/ultrasound. And I'm going to share that here in the Facebook chat. You can go and click on that yourself if you'd like to. And here we detail in a blog post specifically what vagus nerve stimulation across the vagus nerve actually looks like. And some people wonder, is stimulation of nerves with ultrasound a new thing? And actually it's not. Stimulation of the neurons in your body with focused ultrasound, with pulsed ultrasound, is extremely well understood. And it was this kind of work has been started since the 1950s in the United States and across the world. So you can read a little bit more about the history of vagus nerve stimulation and ultrasound stimulation in general, what is being stimulated, the benefits, which are numerous. Let's go down. So the benefits of vagus nerve stimulation in general, that not only come from ultrasound, but do especially come from ultrasound stimulation, are going to be benefits of vagus nerve stimulation: improved mood, loss of anxiety, weight loss, better social skills. When I say weight loss, that also means more or less weight regeneration or body recomposition. It doesn't mean you're just going to start losing weight, okay? It means your body's going to adopt a more natural metabolism and actually go back to the body weight that's more natural for you, what's more healthy, because you need sympathetic and parasympathetic balance to be able to have and maintain a good body weight. So better social skills, lower insulin resistance, normalized blood sugar levels, decreased pain, improvement in cognitive and function and ability, better memory. Definitely a better memory from vagus nerve stimulation, 100%. If you join us on our Friday call, we're going to be talking about memory and insomnia. Memory and insomnia are tightly linked together. And people in the chat, if you can say, if you've been using our inside of our program, our insomnia program, just how impactful that has been, how much it's improved your sleep, how many more vivid dreams you're able to have, a reduction in tinnitus ringing, more vocal melody when you speak. Your vagus nerve controls your voice. You have a less monotonous speaking style. You can speak like me and have a really interesting voice that people like to listen to, and develop a 20,000 person Facebook group because people come from all over the world to listen to Sterling Cooley talk about this kind of stuff, right? And that is in large part because of the work I've done on my vagus nerve too with these technologies. And more meditative and mindful thinking style, reduction in stress, more salivation. So if you have a dry mouth, your vagus nerve isn't stimulating your parotid glands. I think I'm in there, right? In your mouth that release saliva. Better digestion, relaxed facial expression, reduction in facial tension, reduction of TMJ pain, increased hopefulness, better reaction to stressful events, decreased circulating TNF-alpha inflammatory cytokines, and the list goes on. And so you can read that. That is available. And also there's a citations page which you can visit here. So if you want to go and look at actual research, you can go and see it. And we also have an incredible research repository on ultrasound, which is located here on Reddit. And so I'll paste a link to this. We have quite a lot of members here, which is exciting. And then if you want to go read about some of the most recent and specific ultrasound modulation technologies and what's happening, then you can go and read this kind of stuff too. There's a lot of incredible research that I may or may not be able to post in the Facebook group every single day, but at least I'll post it here often. Here's just an interesting article. You can click on it. So yeah, blood pressure modulation with low intensity focused ultrasound stimulation to the vagus nerve, for a pilot study. So you can modulate vagus nerve stimulation with blood pressure. This was done in rabbits, but it's actually stimulation of the vagus nerve in rabbits and rats and mice is actually very translatable, unlike a lot of the medications that you're taking, which are studied on rats, but that does not translate very well. This actually does translate into clinical stuff. So the findings of the study suggested that blood pressure could be modulated through the focused ultrasound, which might provide a way for non-invasive and non-drug management of hypertension. Great. So anyway, I want to get us back to talking about the spleen specifically. So spleen, cholinergic, anti-inflammatory pathway. And let's see what else we got. So here's another interesting article I want to share, or really a picture. So this is a comparison. This study here, this was a comparison of electrical stimulation versus ultrasound stimulation as far as it goes to reducing inflammation. So you see right up here, you see the word where it says anti-inflammation. Some people I do feel get confused because when we say inflammation, there's pro-inflammatory, which means pro meaning an increase, and anti-inflammatory, which is less inflammation. More or less, you're going to want to have anti-inflammation, especially in a human model of autoimmune conditions. So anti-inflammation is what happens. What happens prior to that is we look up here where it says ultrasound stimulation to the spleen, versus stimulation with electricity. You see how far away the electrical stimulation is from the actual real target? It's pretty massive. I mean, we're talking about at least 1 foot of neural connective tissue from the neck down to the spleen, whereas ultrasound stimulation right on top of the spleen gets the effect done significantly well. And you can see the timeline of treatment. So right here on this side, I'll point down here. So on the very bottom, there's this bottom blue thing. And it says US, meaning ultrasound, -1. -1 means the day before ultrasound, okay? Then day 0 was no ultrasound. And then they injected the serum, and then they started stimulating on day 1 of ultrasound. And then they shaved the animal, and they started collecting their blood on day 7 of stimulation. They didn't stimulate ultrasound on that day, and this showed substantial reduction in free-flowing inflammatory markers. This is the article here, and I'm going to share that in the chat as well, so you can go see that yourself if you would like. Boom. So yeah, non-invasive ultrasound stimulation of the spleen to treat inflammatory arthritis was a highly effective form of stimulation. Okay? So, great. Well, I think that's about what I kind of need to share, honestly, if I'm being quite honest with you. I think we went through a really interesting chain of ideas, shared some topics, shared some things. So if you're interested in that specifically, I think one thing I would announce is that this coming Friday, our next live video, we are going to be covering insomnia, and we're going to be making a limited release of a portion of our Insomnia Cure program, which is only made available in full to our clients that are inside of our program, that are actually being coached actively by our team of experts. Now, if you're not being coached by our team of experts in our vagus nerve stimulation and repair program, then that's fine. You'll still get some limited access to our insomnia treatment protocol on Friday. So make sure you join that. If you're watching on Facebook if you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. That helps us get more views, and it helps the algorithm spread the message, spread the hope of what vagus nerve stimulation can do for people. So if you know someone who has issues with inflammation and you think this video might be helpful to them, make sure you go and share this video with them. That would be fantastic. So thanks so much on YouTube, and I'll end it there. Bye-bye.